Could a single heart truly melt a mountain of snow? In the frozen depths of a Tibetan winter, one man's compassion defied nature itself to save lives on the brink of despair. What if the power to transform suffering lies within you, waiting to be awakened? Join us as we unravel the secret of Dromtönpa's miracle and discover how Buddhist wisdom can light your path. Stay with us, you won't want to miss this. The flame in the snow. The wind howled across the Tibetan plateau, a relentless blade slicing through the stillness of winter. Snow blanketed the world in silence, each flake a fleeting whisper of impermanence, piling high until the paths between villages vanished under a frozen shroud. In this desolate expanse, where breath turned to frost and hope seemed to freeze in the chest, a lone figure trudged through the drifts. His name was Dromtönpa, a man whose heart burned with a fire no winter could extinguish. His robes, thin and patched, flapped against the gale, yet his steps were steady, as if guided by a light unseen. You might wonder what drives a man to walk alone in such a storm, when even the yaks huddle together for warmth. Stay with me, for this is no ordinary tale. It is a story of compassion so fierce it could melt the very snow beneath his feet. The village of Karak lay nestled in a valley, its wooden homes trembling under the weight of the blizzard. The people there had not seen a clear sky for weeks, and their stores of barley and yak butter dwindled with each passing day. But it was not hunger that gripped their hearts most tightly. It was fear. A child, barely 5 winters old, had wandered into the storm 2 nights prior, chasing a stray goat. The villagers had searched until their hands bled from clawing at the ice, but the boy, Tenzin, was lost to the white void. His mother, Pema, knelt by the hearth, her prayers rising like smoke to the Buddhas, her tears freezing before they could fall. Can you feel her anguish? The weight of a mother's love battling the cruelty of nature. Hold that feeling, for it is the thread that binds this story together, pulling us toward a moment of wonder. Dromtönpa had heard of the boy's disappearance while meditating in a cave high above the valley. His teacher, the great Atisha, had once told him that true awakening is not found in solitude, but in the act of relieving another's suffering. Those words echoed in his mind as he rose, wrapping his scarf tighter and stepping into the storm. The snow stung his face, each flake a reminder of the fleeting nature of all things, yet also a call to action. For what is the Dharma if not a path to ease the pain of others? As he descended the mountain, his mind was clear, his heart a furnace of resolve. You might ask how a single man could defy the wrath of winter. Keep reading, for the answer lies not in strength but in something far greater. The villagers saw him first as a shadow against the snow, his form blurred by the swirling flakes. They gathered at the edge of Karak, their faces etched with despair, yet curious. Dromtönpa's presence carried a quiet power, like a flame that does not flicker even in the strongest wind. He knelt beside Pema, whose eyes were hollow with grief, and spoke softly. The boy is not lost, only hidden. Trust in the heart that seeks him. His words were simple, yet they stirred something in the crowd, a spark of hope, fragile but undeniable. Have you ever felt a moment when despair begins to crack? When a single voice pulls you back from the edge? That is the power of compassion, and it is only the beginning of what Dromtönpa would do. He asked for no tools, no fire, no army of searchers. Instead, he walked to the center of the village square, where the snow lay thickest, and sat cross-legged upon the frozen ground. The villagers watched, their breath visible in the air, their skepticism warring with a strange anticipation. What could one man do against a storm that had swallowed a child? Dromtönpa closed his eyes, his breath slowing, until it seemed he had become part of the snow itself. In that stillness, he turned his mind inward, not to escape the world, but to embrace it fully. The Buddhist path teaches that all phenomena arise from the mind: snow, storm, suffering, and salvation. If the boy was lost in this frozen world, then the mind that sought him could reshape that world. Can you sense the mystery unfolding? The possibility that reality itself might bend to a heart aligned with truth? The air grew heavy, not with cold, but with something else, a warmth that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The villagers gasped as the snow around Dromtönpa began to shimmer, then soften, then melt. It was no trick of the light, no sudden shift in the weather. The ice beneath his seated form dissolved into rivulets of water, spreading outward in a perfect circle. The ground, once buried under a foot of snow, lay bare and warm, as if spring had awakened in the heart of winter. Whispers spread among the crowd, a mix of awe and disbelief. Pema clutched her shawl, her eyes wide, as if the impossible had become possible before her. Have you ever witnessed a moment when the laws of nature seem to pause, when the world holds its breath? Stay with me, for this is only the beginning of the miracle. Dromtönpa rose, his robes damp but his gaze unwavering. He pointed to a narrow path leading out of the village, now revealed by the melting snow. "He is there," he said, his voice calm but certain. The villagers hesitated, their minds struggling to grasp what their eyes had seen. But Pema did not wait. She ran, her feet splashing through the melted snow, her heart pounding with a hope she had thought lost. The others followed, drawn by her courage and by the strange warmth that still lingered in the air. The path wound upward, toward a cluster of rocks where the storm had raged fiercest. And there, curled beneath an overhang, was Tenzin, alive, shivering, but unharmed, clutching the tiny goat he had chased into the storm. Can you imagine the joy of that moment, the reunion of mother and child against all odds? It is a joy that flows from compassion, and it is not yet the end of our tale. The villagers carried Tenzin back to Karak, their voices raised in gratitude, their faces alight with wonder. They surrounded Dromtönpa, asking how he had done it, how he had turned winter into spring with nothing but his presence. He smiled, his eyes gentle, and said, "The snow melts when the heart is warm. Suffering ends when we see beyond the illusion of separation." His words were not a lecture but an invitation, a call to look within and find the same fire that had melted the snow. The Buddhist teachings speak of the mind's power to shape reality, not through force, but through clarity and love. Dromtönpa had not fought the storm, he had seen through it, recognizing that the boy, the snow, and the village were all part of the same fleeting dance of existence. Do you feel the pull of this truth, the urge to understand how such a mind works? Let us follow this path a little further. The night that followed was filled with stories. The villagers gathered around a fire, their faces glowing, not just from the flames, but from a renewed sense of possibility. Pema held Tenzin close, her tears now ones of gratitude. She asked Dromtönpa, "How can we repay you?" He shook his head, his smile as warm as the fire. "Repay the world," he said. "Act with kindness, see with clarity, and the snow will always melt." His words lingered in the air, each one a seed planted in the hearts of those who listened. The Buddhist path is not about miracles for their own sake, but about awakening the mind to its own boundless potential. Dromtönpa had shown them not just a miracle but a way of being, a way to live with a heart so open that even winter cannot hold it back. Can you feel the warmth of that idea, the promise that lies within it? Stay with me, for this story is far from over. As the fire crackled and the stars emerged above Karak, Dromtönpa sat quietly, his presence a reminder that the greatest miracles are not in the melting of snow, but in the awakening of hearts. The villagers began to share their own stories of loss, of hope, of moments when they had glimpsed something beyond the ordinary. Each tale wove into the next, creating a tapestry of human experience, all tied to the truth that suffering is not the end, but a doorway. The Buddhist teachings tell us that every moment of pain is also a moment of potential, a chance to see the world anew. Dromtönpa listened, his silence as powerful as his words, his presence a beacon in the night. Have you ever sat by a fire, listening to stories that make you feel alive, connected, whole? That is the power of this moment, and it carries us forward into what comes next. The snow had melted, but the storm was not yet done. Beyond the valley, in the high passes, others were trapped. Merchants, nomads, and pilgrims caught in the grip of winter's wrath. Word of Dromtönpa's deed spread, carried by the wind as surely as the snow had fallen. Soon, messengers arrived, their faces desperate, pleading for help. The path to the next village was blocked, they said, and lives hung in the balance. Dromtönpa listened, his eyes distant yet clear, as if seeing not just the messengers but the suffering they described. He stood, his robes still damp from the melted snow, and said, "Let us go." The villagers hesitated, their fear of the storm returning, but Pema stepped forward, her voice steady. "If he can save my son, he can save them all." Her faith was a spark, igniting the courage of others. Can you feel the momentum building, the sense that something greater is at work? Come with me, for the journey continues, and the fire of compassion will light the way. The path through the storm. The wind had not relented, its icy fingers clawing at the travelers as they followed Dromtönpa out of Karak. The path to the high passes was a treacherous ribbon of ice and stone, winding through cliffs that loomed like silent sentinels. The villagers, their courage kindled by Pema's faith, carried torches that flickered weakly against the storm's fury. Dromtönpa led the way, his steps unhurried yet certain, as if the blizzard itself parted to let him pass. His presence was a mystery, a quiet force that made the impossible seem within reach. Have you ever followed someone whose very being seems to bend the world to their will? Stay with me, for this journey is not just through snow, but into the heart of what it means to be truly alive. The messengers had spoken of a caravan trapped in the pass, a group of merchants, their yaks laden with salt and wool, and a handful of pilgrims seeking a distant monastery. The storm had caught them unprepared, burying their camp under drifts too deep to escape. The villagers whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with doubt. How could one man, even one such as Dromtönpa, save so many? Yet Pema, clutching her son's hand, walked beside him, her eyes fixed on his back as if it were a beacon. Her trust was not blind but born of what she had seen. The snow melting beneath his seated form, the impossible made real. Can you feel the weight of her hope, the way it pulls you forward, urging you to see what happens next? As they climbed, the storm grew fiercer, the snow falling in sheets that blinded the eye. The torches sputtered, their flames no match for the gale. Yet Dromtönpa did not falter. He paused at a narrow ledge, where the path vanished into a wall of white, and turned to the group. "Fear is a shadow," he said, his voice cutting through the wind like a bell in the silence. "It grows only when we turn from the light within." The words were simple, yet they stirred the heart, reminding each listener of the Buddhist teaching that suffering arises from clinging to illusions. The villagers straightened, their resolve renewed, as if his words had kindled a fire in their chests. Have you ever heard a truth so clear it feels like a key unlocking something inside you? Hold that feeling, for it is the spark that will carry us through this storm." Dromtönpa knelt once more, his knees sinking into the snow. The group formed a semicircle behind him, their breaths held, their eyes fixed on his still form. The air was thick with cold, yet there was a shift, a subtle warmth, like the first breath of dawn after a long night. The snow around him began to glisten, then soften, then flow like a river released from a dam. The villagers gasped, their disbelief melting as quickly as the ice. The path reappeared, its stones dark and slick, leading upward to where the caravan lay trapped. But this was no mere repetition of the miracle in Karak. The warmth spread further, climbing the cliffs, softening the drifts that had buried the pass. It was as if the mountain itself bowed to his compassion. Can you imagine a world where love could reshape stone and ice? Stay with me, for this is not just a story, but a glimpse into the boundless. The group pressed forward, their steps lighter now, guided by the cleared path. The wind still howled, but it seemed distant, as if reluctant to challenge the warmth that radiated from Dromtönpa. They reached the caravan at dawn, the sky a bruise of gray and gold. The merchants and pilgrims were huddled together, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow with despair. The yaks lowed softly, their breath steaming in the air. A woman, her robes tattered, stumbled forward, her voice cracking as she spoke of 3 days without food, of companions lost to the cold. Dromtönpa listened, his gaze steady, his silence a balm to her fear. He placed a hand on her shoulder, and she stilled, as if his touch carried the weight of 1,000 prayers. Have you ever felt a moment when fear gives way to trust, when a single gesture restores your faith? That is the power of presence, and it is only the beginning of what unfolds. He moved among the caravan, offering words to some, silence to others, his every action a thread in the tapestry of compassion. The villagers joined him, sharing what little they carried: barley cakes, dried yak meat, a flask of buttered tea. But it was not the food that revived the stranded travelers. It was the warmth of Dromtönpa's presence, the certainty that they were seen, that their suffering mattered. The Buddhist teachings speak of the interdependence of all things, how a single act of kindness ripples outward, touching lives beyond the moment. As the caravan began to stir, the merchants unpacking their yaks, the pilgrims chanting softly in gratitude, the air itself seemed to hum with life. Can you feel the pulse of that moment, the way it draws you in, making you part of the story? But the miracle was not yet complete. One pilgrim, an old man with eyes clouded by age, approached Dromtönpa, his hands trembling as he clasped them in reverence. "I sought the monastery to find peace," he said, "but I found only fear in this storm. How do you melt the snow within a heart?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a lifetime's longing. Dromtönpa smiled, his eyes reflecting the faint light of dawn. "The snow within melts when you see that it was never there," he said. "Your heart is already warm. You have only to trust it." The old man wept, not from sorrow but from a sudden clarity, as if the storm in his mind had parted to reveal a boundless sky. Have you ever glimpsed a truth that shifts the way you see yourself? Stay with me, for this moment is a doorway to something deeper. The caravan, now freed from the snow's grip, prepared to move. The merchants offered Dromtönpa bolts of wool and bags of salt, their gratitude overflowing. He refused gently, his hands raised in a gesture of giving rather than taking. "Carry this warmth to others," he said. "That is the only offering I seek." The villagers, too, felt the weight of his words, their hearts stirred by the realization that they had been part of something greater than themselves. Pema, still holding Tenzin's hand, whispered to her son, "See how one heart can change the world." The boy nodded, his young eyes wide with wonder, as if he could see the ripples of this moment stretching far beyond the mountains. Can you sense the power of that ripple, the way it pulls you forward, eager to see where it leads? As the group descended the pass, the storm began to quiet, the snow falling more gently now, as if in reverence. The path Dromtönpa had cleared remained open, a testament to the fire of compassion that no winter could extinguish. But the journey was not over. In the distance, another village sent up a signal, a thin plume of smoke, a cry for help carried on the wind. The villagers looked to Dromtönpa, their faces a mix of exhaustion and resolve. He met their gazes, his own eyes alight with a quiet determination. "The heart that melts snow does not tire," he said. And with those words, he turned toward the new call. The group followed, their steps buoyed by a shared purpose, their doubts swept away like snow in the sun. Have you ever felt the pull of a purpose so strong it carries you beyond your limits? Come with me, for the fire of this story burns brighter still, and its warmth will guide us to the end. The dawn of Boundless Heart. The plume of smoke rose like a fragile prayer against the gray sky, curling from a distant village nestled in the shadow of a jagged peak. The wind carried whispers of desperation. Families cut off by the storm, their homes buried, their hope fading like the last embers of a dying fire. Dromtönpa led the way, his silhouette a steady flame against the snow-dusted horizon. The villagers of Karak, the merchants and the pilgrims followed, their steps heavier now, yet lifted by a shared resolve that seemed to pulse in time with his own. Pema walked with Tenzin, her son's small hand warm in hers, his eyes bright with a courage that mirrored her own. Have you ever felt a journey draw you onward? Not by force, but by a quiet certainty that you are part of something vast. Stay with me, for this final stretch will reveal the heart of the miracle. The path to the village of Tsokar was a gauntlet of ice and wind, the storm's last stand against the warmth that trailed Dromtönpa like a shadow of light. The group moved in silence, their breaths mingling with the snow, their hearts tethered to the man who had melted a mountain's wrath. As they neared Tsokar, the smoke grew thicker, tinged with the acrid scent of burning wood. A signal fire, lit by those who clung to life beneath the snow's weight. The villagers of Karak exchanged glances, their faces etched with memories of their own deliverance. They knew what awaited. Homes collapsed under drifts, children shivering, elders whispering prayers to Buddhas they feared had turned away. But Dromtönpa's presence was a reminder that no prayer goes unheard when the heart is awake. Can you feel the tension building, the promise of salvation just beyond the next rise? Let us press on together. At the edge of Tsokar, the devastation was stark. Roofs sagged under snow, their beams splintered like bones. A handful of survivors huddled around a dwindling fire, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow with the weight of loss. A young woman, her shawl torn, rushed forward, her voice breaking as she spoke of her brother, trapped in a collapsed house, his cries growing fainter with each hour. Dromtönpa listened, his gaze steady, as if he could hear the boy's heartbeat through the snow. He placed a hand on her arm, and she stilled, her fear softening in the warmth of his presence. The Buddhist teachings tell us that suffering is not a wall, but a gate, and in that moment, the gate began to open. Have you ever seen despair give way to hope, like a crack of light in a darkened room? Hold that image, for it is the key to what comes next. Dromtönpa moved to the center of the village, where the snow lay deepest, a frozen tomb over the buried homes. The crowd gathered, their breath visible in the frigid air, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of awe and expectation. He did not sit this time, nor did he close his eyes. Instead, he raised his hands, palms upward, as if offering the storm itself to the sky. "All things are born of the mind," he said, his voice soft yet resonant, carrying the weight of a truth older than the mountains. "The snow is heavy only because we believe it so. Let us see it as it is, fleeting, empty, and ready to yield." The words were a spark, igniting something in the hearts of those who listened. The air shimmered, and the snow began to glisten, then soften, then flow, as if the earth itself exhaled a long-held breath. Can you feel the world shifting, the impossible bending to the will of compassion? Stay with me, for the miracle is unfolding. The snow melted in waves, revealing the shattered remains of Sokar's homes. The villagers of Karak and the caravan rushed forward, digging with bare hands, guided by the cries of those trapped beneath. The young woman's brother was found, his body curled tight but alive, his eyes wide with disbelief as he was pulled into his sister's arms. Others emerged, elders, children, a monk clutching a tattered prayer wheel, each one a testament to the fire that burned in Dromtönpa's heart. The survivors wept, their tears mixing with the melted snow, their voices rising in gratitude. The Buddhist path teaches that every act of compassion is a step toward awakening, and in that moment, Sokar was reborn, not just in body but in spirit. Have you ever witnessed a moment when the world feels new, when love rewrites the story of suffering? That is the power of this moment, and it carries us further still. As the village stirred back to life, Dromtönpa walked among the people, his presence a quiet anchor. He helped rebuild the fire, his hand steady as he placed wood in the flames, his silence speaking louder than words. The survivors offered him what little they had: dried apricots, a woven blanket, a prayer scarf faded by time. He accepted each gift with a bow, not for himself but to honor their giving, then returned them with a smile. "The true gift is your heart," he said. "Keep it warm, and no winter can touch you." His words were not a command, but a seed, planted in the minds of those who listened, ready to bloom in acts of kindness yet to come. The Buddhist teachings remind us that the mind shapes reality, and a heart alight with compassion can melt any storm. Can you feel the truth of that, the way it stirs something deep within you? Let it linger, for the story is not yet done. Night fell over Sokar, the stars piercing the now clear sky like jewels scattered across a velvet cloth. The villagers of Karak, the caravan, and the people of Sokar gathered around the fire, their faces glowing with a warmth that went beyond the flames. Stories flowed like rivers, tales of loss, of miracles, of hearts rekindled by a man who saw no separation between himself and the suffering of others. Pima spoke of her son, Tenzin, saved from the snow, her voice steady with gratitude. The old pilgrim from the pass shared his newfound peace, his fear melted by Dromtönpa's words. Even the merchants, hardened by years of trade, spoke softly of a change within them, a desire to give more than they took. Have you ever sat among others, sharing stories that weave you together, making you feel part of something greater? That is the magic of this moment, and it binds us to the end. Dromtönpa sat quietly, his eyes reflecting the firelight, his presence a reminder that the greatest miracles are not in the melting of snow, but in the awakening of hearts. He spoke once more, his voice low yet clear. "The storm is not your enemy, nor is the snow your cage. They are teachers, showing you the fleeting nature of all things. See them clearly, act with love, and you will find freedom." The words settled over the crowd like a gentle snow, not cold but warm, each one a spark of understanding. The Buddhist path is not about escaping the world but embracing it fully, seeing through the illusions of separation and suffering to the boundless truth beneath. Can you feel the weight of that truth, the way it calls you to live differently? Hold it close, for it is the gift of this journey. As dawn broke, the group prepared to part ways, the villagers returning to Karak, the caravan to its trade routes, the pilgrims to their distant monastery. Dromtönpa stood at the edge of Sokar, his robes fluttering in the morning breeze, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Pema approached, Tenzin at her side, and placed a small stone in his hand, a smooth pebble from the river, warmed by her touch. "For you," she said, "to remember us." He smiled, turning the stone in his fingers, then handed it back. "Keep it," he said. "It is your heart that will remember." With that, he turned and walked into the dawn, his figure fading into the light, leaving behind a warmth that no winter could extinguish. Have you ever felt a story linger in your bones, urging you to carry its light into the world? That is the legacy of Dromtönpa, and it lives in you now. The villages of Karak and Sokar spoke of him for generations, not as a legend, but as a living truth. A reminder that compassion can melt any storm, that the mind awake to its own nature can reshape reality. The snow would fall again, as it always does, but the people carried a new fire within them, a warmth that no cold could touch. And so, the story does not end, but ripples outward, touching lives beyond the mountains, beyond time itself. Can you feel it calling you, inviting you to act with the same boundless love? Stay with it, for this is not just a tale, but a path, and you are already walking it.